Thank you everybody for coming to the April AWPUG Meetup. Tonight we have Greg Meece and Pratik Malia speaking about robot framework for Greg and application-specific caching for Pratik. I think they're both going to be really good presentations. I want everybody to give a hand to WP Engine for bringing pizza and bringing beer, and they have a bunch of awesome pizzas in the back. So if you see anybody from WP Engine, like this guy or any of those people in the black in the black shirts, like say thank you and say hello. Another thing, like I don't know, probably everybody knows this, but DjangoCon is going to be in Austin this fall. If you are involved with DjangoCon, raise your hand. Awesome. Get involved with DjangoCon. So talk to Chris, because apparently he knows something about DjangoCon being in Austin. So if you want to get involved, he's the guy to talk to, I guess. Sorry for putting you on the spot. All right, so we got Anthony from WP Engine. He wants to talk a little bit about what it's like.
Yeah.
We're really honored to get to sponsor this. Me and several other people come to this regularly. I really love it. So, WP Engine, a lot of people associate us with WordPress appropriately, which is in PHP. So you're probably wondering, what the hell are you doing here at Python? So the answer is, we do a lot of Python. From our DevOps team that runs a lot of things with Ansible and Python associated stuff, to our services team, which runs Django with the RESTful framework. To our data team, which is running a lot of Python scripts to process big data. You know, we have a few people with us, 30,000 customers, 200-some thousand websites, and all the data associated with it. We're hiring. We are in a hyper-growth mode. It is really exciting times. I love the work we do there. I run our business systems, our internal team, our internal tools team, which covers everything from finance to marketing to sales to support to even our data right now, until I can hand that off next week. So if you're interested, if there's anything that makes you, any of this seems interesting to you, come hit up any one of us. There's 3 guys at the back table, Justin right there, Joe, Chase, Eric, Paul, Lauren. Hit up any one of us. We'll be happy to talk to you about us and the opportunities we have.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we have Greg Meece here, and he's going to talk about the robot framework.
Great. I will definitely use that. So you're definitely not seeing me at my best. My voice decided to go out earlier this week. Hopefully this will come back alive. Hang on a second. There we go. All right. Let me kick off the slide deck here real quick. I realize that most people here are probably developers. Can you all hear me okay? I realize it's not the best. Normally I can actually speak without a microphone, but this is what you get today. So obviously I'm talking about Robot Framework, and it is a automated testing framework that is designed for acceptance testing. Some of the main ways that people use it is for web applications, databases, and a lot more. And I'll touch on that in just a second. So just a bit about myself. My name is Greg Meece. I work for a company called CIG Logistics. I've got a couple of my team members here that are here to provide moral support with my lack of voice today. I've been in software QA for about 20 years. So I kind of look like it, don't I? If you're interested, my LinkedIn profile there, I don't know why you'd want it, but there it is. So some of the companies I work for, just kind of give you an idea that I didn't fall off the turnip truck. Years and years ago, I worked for Kinko's Corporate. Before they got bought out by FedEx, I was actually a Macintosh programmer there. So that's kind of where I got my start in software development. Later on, I went to the Peter Norton group at Symantec. I actually met Peter Norton a couple times. Later on, I worked for a company called Avid Technology. They do a lot of video and film editing and special effects. With a group that did special effects, and one of the people, I don't know how versed some of you are, but one of my coworkers was a guy named Brian Paul, and I was chatting with him one day, and I said, "So, what do you do for fun?" And he goes, "Well, I have this little open source library called Meece." And I go, "Well, what's that do?" He goes, "Well, it's an OpenGL work-alike." Well, if you've ever pried open your Linux VM or box or whatever it is, you'll find Meece doing all the interface stuff for OpenGL or OpenGL equivalents. And very humble guy. I had no idea that he had that background. But anyway, that was a fun gig. Unfortunately, it lasted a very short time because they decided to close down their site. Here in town, I worked for Pervasive Software a couple times. I forget what they're called now. There's something else, but they go to, what are they? Okay. And Whole Foods for 5 years in the IT department as a programmer analyst there. So that was an interesting experience. And then, of course, everybody's favorite stepfather. I was about to say abusive stepfather, but I don't mean that. Dell. Everybody has to spend some time in Dell. And, you know, we love Dell. It keeps Round Rock mildly interesting. What is Robot Framework? It's authored by Pekka Clark. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's yet another brilliant Finnish guy. Not quite as famous as some guy named Torvalds, but nonetheless, he's a pretty sharp guy. It is I'm going to try to get this out here, an all-purpose automated acceptance keyword-driven testing framework. That's a big mouthful. But it's all-purpose in the sense that it's not designed for just one type of testing. What you'll be seeing tonight primarily, though, will be web testing. And I'll be using the Selenium 2 libraries, but it can do all kinds of things, and I'll touch on that in a moment. It's acceptance testing because it doesn't do certain other types of testing, and I'll be covering that as well. Keyword-driven, it's designed to be written in such a way that you can have non-technical stakeholders look at your test cases and understand what they're doing, because you can write them in more or less plain English. It's written and is extendable in Python. You can also use Java to extend it, but we're about Python here, right? So we don't care about the Java stuff. It's got the Apache 2 license, so you can use it and abuse it however you want to, and hosted on GitHub. I will, by the way, at the end of all this, I'm going kind of fast, because I'm trying to respect everybody's time, and I know we got another speaker lined up. But anybody who lets me know that they want this slide deck to be shared, just give me your email, and I'll share it with you, and you can have access to all of this. So what can it test? Well, websites and applications is one of the main things we're going to be talking about tonight. Databases. The two main types of databases that it can support right now, at least with the libraries I'm aware of, are SQL, relational databases, and also MongoDB. I'm sure probably somewhere somebody else is working on other kinds of database libraries. I'm just not aware of them, but that's what I'm aware of at this point. Mobile apps, both iOS and Android. I haven't had any experience with that, but I've read on forums that people seem to be fairly happy. There are two different approaches to doing iOS and Android testing. The last time I did that type of testing, I was about 3 floors down in Netspend, just in the same building here. But I don't have any experience with robot and mobile testing. Also, Windows applications. Has anybody ever used something called AutoIT or AutoIT? I don't know how it's pronounced, but anybody ever use that? You can introspect any kind of Windows dialog or window or whatever, and you can click on buttons and so on. It's kind of like Selenium, but for Windows. Unfortunately, as much as I've been a Mac guy most of my life, to my knowledge, there's no library that's designed for Mac testing, but maybe somebody will write one. So libraries. I'm going to kind of jam through these just because it's just text on the page. All the things in bold I've used. Built in is just sort of like the rudimentary stuff. Collections lets you deal with Python type of data structures like dictionaries and lists and that type of thing. And you can find if something exists in it. You can get a value from a key and that type of thing. Date time speaks for itself. Dialogues I've used. Just kind of jam through here. String I've used a lot. You can do all kinds of regex and string manipulation and determination and so on. Telnet and XML. There's also a bunch of external libraries, and I'm just going to jam through these real quick. I'll stop on a couple. Database I use a lot. I use that for testing our application. I alluded to the fact that I've got a couple team members here. So our application is PHP based. Yay. But it has a MySQL backend. And so a lot of times I'll have to input stuff in through the UI using Robot, and then verifying that the right information got there with the database library, all using Robot Framework. Let's see what else here. Faker. Anybody ever try to get reasonably looking fake data into a form? And it gets really tiring of you just jamming on the keys and names, and after a while your brain just kind of explodes and you've used Donald Duck how many times. So Faker is a good library to use. It's available on a lot of different platforms, and Robot's got that access, so you can just fill in addresses or names or whatever you want. And then I've stopped on HTTP requests. We are starting to move ahead in making our API more robust. And that's in interacting with a customer that we have that needs that API interface. So I'm going to be moving ahead, hopefully soon, into using this for REST testing. Let's see, jam on through here. Selenium 2, I'll be talking about quite a bit tonight. And then for those of you that have maybe an existing QA department and they fell in love with water, anybody familiar with water? One person. I believe that was written by Brett Petticord here in town, and it's Ruby based, no boos or hisses, but I'm not a Ruby guy. But those who have invested in a big infrastructure for testing, my understanding is this library lets you link in those test cases with this library. So anyway, a lot of background noise here. So what doesn't it do? It isn't designed for unit testing, because y'all are doing that already, right? Right, you're doing that. Performance testing, load testing, not really. Stress testing, no. Usability, of course not. That's really something that still has to be kind of done manually. You know, you have to have a real human with real eyeballs and a brain between the ears to determine whether or not something meets a usability criteria. So just a quick look at the architecture. At the top, you've got you have your test data. That's your test cases, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Underneath that is the Robot Framework, and not only does it execute the test cases and talk to the libraries underneath it, which in turn talk to the system under test, but it also provides all the reporting and logging that you need to know what happened after you ran those tests. So that's the basic architecture. Test case formats, there's a number of different formats that are fairly flexible. The first type is just the keyword driven, and it's just the raw keywords, as you can see there. Now, if these look funny and made up, they are, but you could actually write test cases with names like this. What you have to do, though, is these are effectively functions that you have to define elsewhere. Could either be in the actual file that you're executing the test case from, or in some sort of master resource file, which is my general approach, to put everything there sort of like a big include file. But you can kind of see what it does right there. You know, initialize the system, whatever that means, but it's spinning something up, calculate meaning of life, and result should be 42. I had to put that in there. Actually, I had a one-on-one conversation with Douglas Adams before he died. It's probably one of my few claims to fame. Anyway, you don't care, I know. Data-driven example. So you specify a template, which I'm not showing you here, but the template determines what happens when you feed it data. And as you can see here, it takes at least two variables, two parameters to input. So it just chunks on through. So if you had a bunch of very, very, very similar test cases, but you had different data, then this might be a good pattern to follow. So you would define what is happening with the template that I've named test temp 1. So whatever that keyword defines as far as the template goes, you're going to be feeding it these arguments. And so it's just going to just kind of chunk on through. So you might want to, like it might be, attempting to break into a user login or something like that, and you just have a bunch of different things. Or you want to try all the potential edge cases for inputting in a field, and so you have all kinds of things you want to try. You want to try, if it's an alpha only field, you want to try numeric values, and then you want to try negative values, and you want to try Unicode values, and whatever. You just want to kind of jam on through that. The style that I have favored and I've pretty much standardized on is the gherkin style. Has anybody ever heard of cucumber as a test framework? Okay, a lot of people have heard of cucumber. All right, so this is basically sort of derived from, and it was in a sense an homage to cucumber, which uses this type of syntax. Effectively, the first word that you see there on each sentence is it's kind of ignored, but it helps, especially if you're trying to communicate to your non-technical stakeholders, well, what is this doing, So given system is initialized, you're saying this is the starting condition, and when this happens, then this should be the final result. So it makes it easy to read, and that's one I've standardized on. Finally, I just want to point out too, some people love pipes, and I kind of like pipes, but it reduces readability for non-technical stakeholders. So I do use this from time to time, but for the most part, I prefer the gherkin style. Pardon me. So anyway, I know I'm going really fast. If you have questions that are burning questions, just raise your hand and I'd be happy to stop. But I'll just soldier on here. I cannot vet the code you're about to see, but I learned a little bit of C# last time I was at Dell, and my understanding is that this particular function, if you pass it in a string for the header information, and then what you're expecting, it looks through the head of the table and determines whether or not that value exists. Now in Robot, this is what it looks like. Now I know it's really small. Can you all see that? It's kind of teeny tiny. I tried to highlight the keyword that Robot has there. Table column should contain. Pretty easy to understand. And then you just pass it in, where to go find it, and then expected value, and then a message, optionally a message to indicate why it failed. So it's a lot more compact. It's a lot more easy to maintain. If you live in you're just coding all the time, and maybe that, I think it's easier for me just to write, for example, Python code and write directly to Selenium. And you may be right, but what if you have a less advanced coworker, maybe a QA guy that, kind of like me, is mostly a QA guy who can kind of code. You probably want to hand them something more like what you see with Robot. So you're thinking, okay, that's nice, but I'm a developer, not a QA guy, right? So, yeah, but don't be this guy, right? You don't want to test your code when you've pushed it to production, right? So, all right, so why invest in testing? And this is just sort of a general, I'm on my soapbox here, so I'm going to just kind of crank through these things. So you're already doing unit testing, right? Right? Everybody's doing that, right? I laugh because I know that's not always the reality. So maybe you haven't embraced test-driven development. I understand the spirit behind it, and I can also I can appreciate the shops that do that. Anybody actually have adopted that at where you work? Actually adopted test-driven development. If you have a long runway, you don't have a pressure for time to market, and you know what you need now, and you're like, what, we can take time to build it right now. Let's just do it right now. Test-driven development, I think, is a good approach. Most of us don't live in that world. We have to get a customer's request out like yesterday. And so usually it's kind of like, I'll build it and I hope it works and let's see what happens. But hopefully you got this unit test in place that will warn you if you're doing something extremely stupid. I would like to encourage you to embrace TAD, T-A-D. What does that mean? I made it up. Testing aware development. Maybe somebody else has got that acronym and I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of my view of things, is that even when you're, pardon me, even when you're dealing with deadlines and you have to march ahead and you have to get stuff out, you should always think about, is my code testable? Not only can I test it and think it's good, can I hand it off to somebody else? Even if it's not a QA person, can I hand it off to another developer? Can they test it? Can they see that it actually does what I've designed it to do? So I would throw this to you. If your app isn't testable and tested, is it really done? I think it's a little bit of a rhetorical question. My answer would be probably not. So if your company doesn't have a QA team, who tests your app? Sometimes you'll pass it around and say, hey, why don't you bang on this for a while? Why don't you take a look at it? A lot of times it'll be a business stakeholder, and often a business stakeholder will have some good eyes on it, and they'll go, okay, I know it's supposed to do X, Y, and Z. Let me try that. Hey, it does it. Awesome. We're good to go. He probably didn't do anything but take the happy path. He did all the right things that you're supposed to do on that form, and things are wonderful. He did not try to, put too many characters in a field. He didn't try to put, alpha values in a numeric only field. He didn't do all the crazy things that QA guys like to do. So the question is, if nobody else is doing it, who's doing it? So even if you're not going to wear that hat, even if you don't want to wear that hat, it's still, I use a big word, it behooves you to embrace testing as part of what you do as a developer. So why robot framework? Test cases written so stakeholders can understand. Like I pointed out a while ago, you can write them in such a way that if they just look at the test cases themselves, they may not know all the magic that's going on underneath. They can understand what you're trying to accomplish. And additionally, I'll point out later, the reporting is very, very clear. It demonstrates end user functionality. So if you've been working on, some functions or methods that, somebody higher up is never going to understand or see. You want to be able to demonstrate, hey, this is what this does. You can actually gen up a little demo using robot framework. It's easier to do than just writing in raw Selenium. And you can write it in such a way and say, okay, this is what it does. You can walk them through it and just have it be repeatable, easy to see, easy to understand. So it's easy to demonstrate the end user functionality really is there. Also helps you emerge, like if the business stakeholder says, that's not what we wanted to do. You go, oh, okay. All right, be a little more clear next time. But also provides a template for others. You can say, this is what I want it to do. So if you do have some poor sucker who's your QA guy, you can say, this is what I want you to do, but repeat it in all these areas. Go forth and prosper. I like this analogy. It's your canary in a coal mine. I hope I don't offend any animal lovers here, but if you understand the idiom, back in the day when the miners would go and they would be exploring new shafts of whatever they're mining, I don't know, and they might be exposed to poisonous gases, or they might just be exposed to lack of oxygen, and they'd literally have a canary in a bird cage, and if that canary fell over, like either passed out or died, they would go, we probably shouldn't be here. Let's back out of here. So to me, to really kind of use that analogy, that something's changed. So if you have a set of test cases that just run, and something goes red that wasn't red before, it may be that the test case was written with wrong assumptions or assumptions that have changed, but it also may be that you broke something and you should know about it. So it's at least something that you can track down. Also, I brought this from a guy that wasn't able to make it here tonight. He called it mailbox money. It's The more common term today is passive income, right? Once you write those test cases, there's nothing preventing you from letting those run as many times as you want, as long as you want, late at night. You don't have to pay somebody to be here at 2 a.m. Have, some automated process kick it off, cron or a continuous integration server, make it run. Even those really long test cases that take, manually take, 35, 40 minutes to set up and test, just automate it, and then that thing happens, even if it takes almost as long as it does manually, it's just happening, and mailbox money. Minor changes can influence many parts of the app. Sometimes you can make a little change over here, but well, that's not gonna affect anything else. Yeah, I've seen that before. Yeah, played whack-a-mole many a time with that. It's easily integrated into CI servers, like I just mentioned, like Jenkins. Actually, I'll just show you a real quick flash of something in a minute of what our Jenkins looks like. Kind of ugly at the moment, but we're getting there. Very readable and detailed reporting. And again, I'll show you that. So here's an example. I know it's a small screenshot. I'll show you something bigger a little bit later. This is what every test case passing looks like. It's this annoying, ugly, but in your face, you know what's happening, green. Everything's green. Green is good. So you know everything that you've written is passing. If you have some fails, it turns into this blurring red color. So you know some things have failed. And I realize that the screenshot's really small, but you can see some things have passed, some things have failed. There is a facility within Robot, which we are starting to leverage, where you can designate some things as non-critical. That uses a tagging feature so that you can create tags for every test case. And I've designated one I just call non-critical. And when we execute our jobs, we tell it that the tag non-critical is a non-critical test. I know I'm very inventive. But what that means is if one of those test cases fail, it doesn't turn red. That is the big background doesn't turn red. The individual test cases that fail will still turn red, but it doesn't say, hey, let's hit the brakes. We can't go any further. The build is broken. Stop everything you're doing. It's more like, you might want to look at this, So, and finally the log, again, small screenshot, I apologize, I'll show you more detail later, but you can drill down. Anytime you see a test case that failed, you can drill down to the exact step, exactly what happened. Sometimes that will give you a lot of insight, like, oh, this variable didn't get initialized. Why didn't it get initialized? Oh, we did something funny with the database and I can't access that record anymore, All right, so the demo people tell you, don't tell, show, so enough of the jibba jabba. I'm gonna kind of back out of this here and give you a little bit of a view of this. No idea what is all of this. Apologies, that's my Android phone telling me stuff I don't care about. All right, so I'm gonna run a quick positive test case for a little fake hosted server. And I'm actually gonna show you what that looks like. I don't know why my windows are resized here, but can you all see that? Is that big enough to be able to read? I can zoom in a little bit more. Is that readable? Yes, okay. All right, this is an example, super simple test case. At the first part of it, I can just put a little bit of documentation if I want to, don't have to have that. Here's where I link in all the libraries that I'm going to use. In this case, it's just Selenium 2. And then I can link in a resource file, which happens to be one level above where I'm at right now. And then I've got some variables that I am declaring here. So here's the test case. Valid login states what it intends to test. Given browser is open to the login page, when user demo logs in with password mode, then welcome page should be open. It's pretty simple, basic. Again, not trying to show any kind of real world thing, but just to give you a taste of it. And I can slow this down if you would prefer, but it's going to kind of come and go real quick. Normally, also too, I would maximize the window, but since we just have one screen. So boom, there it was. So it basically tried that, got to the welcome screen, it said, yay, I'm at the right place, all is wonderful in the world. Another test case I'll try here real quick is, that was called positive. Now I'm gonna try a negative test case. And this one, I am trying all kinds of combinations of username and passwords that shouldn't let me in. So just real quick to let that run. So it's going to try a valid username, invalid password, and invalid username, valid password, etc. Try blanks. It's like a very, very rudimentary penetration test. So just let that run. But you can see as it's going through here, it's trying the things that I've told it to try, and it's finding what it's expecting to find, and sure enough, everything's passing. Once it is done here, which I think is, yeah, it's got one more. I realize this is as fun as watching the paint dry. So the negative tests here, a lot more to them. So I've got, the descriptions of each. I won't necessarily do it, but I wanted to show you here, I've commented out the second.
Can you increase the font size bigger?
Oh, yes, sorry. Absolutely. Preferences, font, larger. I go larger than that if you guys like.
Couple more.
Okay. Oops, sorry. All right, is that good? Yes, no, yes.
One more.
One more, okay.
Yeah, one more.
No problem. Sorry about this. Is that still? Is that all right? Yeah, I apologize. I realize it's hard to see. We've got the same basic kind of stuff at the start. You've got each of the test cases have, I put a little documentation in there, not required, but often very helpful when you run test cases so that you and or stakeholders can understand, well, what did we just do? It's, descriptive, valid username, and valid password, etc. This part that I have commented out is exactly the same as this one right here, but rather it uses the pipe delimitation. I've just commented it out, but you get the idea that it's the same thing, same principles. And so I've got all of these here. Now, if I wanted to see, well, how did that turn out? I want to get a report on it. And I'm not spelling it right. What I'm going to do is show you, this is what the report looks like. And so for any of the tests, I can drill down and there we go. So I have all of my test cases here. So on the far left column, you see this, the name, then the documentation that I put in there. And you'll notice that Robot supports some very limited kind of markup. It supports bold, italic, and monospace. So if you need to have that stuff in the documentation or the report, you can do that. And then it tells you what tags were used in that particular test case. And of course the status and all that kind of stuff, and how long it took and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, what I really want to show you tonight is you can extend Robot to do so much more than what like Selenium alone will let you do. How many have used Selenium in anything that you do? So a fair amount of people, right? So Selenium, if you ask Selenium, give me the value that is in row number 5, column number 4, it will do it for you, right? You can get that. But what if you say, I want the third instance of value foo in the column named bar? Selenium by itself won't do that for you. And a couple places I worked at, including where I'm at right now, I found that challenging. And because you don't always know, there might be something else that gets rolled out, like, oh, by the way, we added a new column, and it just offset everything that you designed your test for. So I wrote a Python library to extend it. And it's really pretty easy to do. So easy, a QA guy can do it. So you can see here, I happen to find the LXML library to be very handy for some of the things I was doing to parse tables. So I use that, and the rest is just things that I need to do in order to get an interface with Robot rather. And so I've got all kinds of helper functions in here that tells me how many columns there are. Does column with name exist? And it's pretty much standard stuff. The keyword R that you see here, most of the pages that we have for our app, there's just one table on that page, so I don't have to specify exactly where to go. So I can just say go to the table and it'll find it. But in other cases, I need to let's see if I can scroll over here. In other cases, I need to kind of give it an XPath to find the table in question. But this allows me to do all kinds of stuff with tables. And so I wrote that and a few other helper functions. And the nice thing about Robot is that if you want to, you can just use the function name or method name just exactly how you see it here. Or you can use it like this, where it's not studly caps, it's whatever you call that, like plain English. It understands that the underscores should be interpreted as spaces or vice versa, and so it makes it easy to incorporate your library into the Robot framework. So I don't think that this is at a place where it makes sense to open source any of it. Some of it's very particular to our particular needs, but I will, as a final demo, run the test I have for that. And let's see here. This kind of runs my routines through a number of tests. Let's see here. Sorry about that, I should have this ready to go. Okay, so now it's running through a number of my routines. It's asking, does this column exist? What do you find here? Just doing crazy stuff there. So it's, it's finding the value of something and clicking on a link and, going places and making sure that it landed in the right place and all that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of jamming through all my functions there. So anyway, not a lot to see there, but it does magic. Anyway, my point is, for this group, you can extend things that you can't do in Selenium alone, or you have to do a lot of extra work. It's relatively easy to get Robot to do more by writing a small library like this. And I'm somewhere between beginner and beginning intermediate in my Python skills, and maybe that's debatable. My point is that it's relatively easy to do. So let me pop back over to conclude. All right, back here. So I'm hoping that you'll see that Robot can be an extension of who you are and who you are as a developer. So I'll let Bruce Campbell, express his feelings about mechanical stuff here. Anyway, I don't know if we have any Army of Darkness fans, but there we go. So this is a summary of why you would want to have a Robot framework or other automated tests. You write once, execute as many times as you want. Runs when you want it to, lots of regressions, you don't have to worry about it. Gives you wider testing footprint, demonstrates acceptance functionality, alerts you to changes, integrates with CI systems, and gives a state of health to the stakeholders. You can tell them at any time, like, this is how we're doing. We're passing 95% of our test cases, or whatever the case might be. And this I'm just going to jam through just because you can't write it all down. But let me know afterwards. Give me your email address, and I can send you a share to this deck. So anything that you want to get out of that. So, any questions? Realize I've been talking very quickly, and So any questions that you might have about the framework?
I have a
Yes.
question. A lot of times when we do, especially like front end sort of automated testing, especially in Selenium, that looks a lot like what you're doing in the robot. We run into some like robustness issues where tests fail, but it would be okay. Like there's not really an error, but the test is failing and it should be tested, so we're getting false negatives. Do you have like any like tricks to deal with that, or is it just a matter of like being smart about writing your tests?
Well, sort of the last thing that you said, but that it only comes with experience. And so what I've started to learn and started to incorporate in my test cases is a lot of times I would have it, for example, click a button, and then there was a follow-up confirmation dialogue. And I would say, okay, click this button, and then click this button on the follow-up dialogue. It might take a split second for that follow-up dialogue to come up, and sometimes, just depending on the timing, it may not be there in time for it to recognize it. And so what I've taken to doing is invoking the wait until element is present keyword, and you can supply the timeout value. So if you say, well, if it's not there in 5 seconds, then forget it, you have failed the test. But I've started to incorporate that in more test cases so that I don't have some of those false failures that believe me, I know the pain. And it's frustrating because you're like, man, I spent hours on a dumb thing, and yet it fails sporadically. And so I'm starting to see some of that addressed that way. And the nice thing about that keyword is that even if you gave it 20 seconds, if it finds it in half a second, it's just gonna move on. So you don't have to put an artificial sleep in there to wait for 20 seconds, hoping that it will get there. So that's one of the techniques that I found, and I'm sure there's going to be more I'm going to be learning in the future. So, yes.
Does that you talked about some kind of tagging? Can you do that for these kind of tests?
Yes.
I mean,
all the test cases that I have. Let me get to something here. So, for example, you can see this one that's right in front of here. I just made up some tags: login, negative, and you can have any kind of tagging you want. And you can actually, you could, for example, set up jobs in. I'll just use Jenkins as an example because it's one I'm familiar with. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you a quick, ugly look at our actual Jenkins. Hopefully that won't violate any NDAs I'm sure I signed at some point. But this is actually our Jenkins board right now. So a lot of tests, a lot of failings. Some of them are not really fully implemented yet, but we're just getting going on our full implementation. But you can actually execute on a tag-only basis. So you can say, only execute test cases with this tag. So yeah, it's very free form. It's whatever you want it to be. So did I answer your question, or?
so you can have a tag which says that if this test fails, then it's okay.
Yeah. So you can in one of the calling parameters you can add in there is I think it's -n, and then whatever tag you call that you consider non-critical or tags, you can actually continue to add -n blah -n blah. Any of those tags that you specify with a -n are going to be considered as non-critical. So if they fail, you'll still be alerted to it in the reporting. You'll see those will be red, but the overall job, if you would, will be considered to be green or passing. So, yes, sir.
Even with robot, do you run into cases that are too convoluted to build automated tests for? Is that a problem that you have?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's some kind of tests that you always kind of have to go for, is this going to buy me something enough in the long run that if it takes me 6 hours to write a test, that even if I executed it every build manually, it would take me 30 seconds, right? Because sometimes it's, to get the right logic down, it might be very involved. And you have to kind of make that call. It's like, you know what, that's going to take me 30 seconds to do. I can do it every build manually, and I can do it that fast. So you kind of have to find that balance. And so for anything that we're trying to automate, among other things, two major areas of concern. One is anything that we think might have a possibility of regression, even if it's a distant possibility. If it's relatively easy to automate, then go for it. Just go ahead and automate that, put that in the queue, and then that executes every single time. And every once in a while, like we caught something the other day that it was like none of us thought it was going to fail, but it did, and it just alerted us that something small in the configuration file or something like that got changed. So yeah, I mean, there's some things that there are always going to be manual test cases, and you're never going to eliminate. I think it was James Bach that talked about how a lot of automation vendors are basically selling snake oil as if it's going to eliminate all manual testing. So, this way.
In the robot framework, how do you specify what type of browser you want to see?
It recognizes Chrome, Firefox, IE, Safari, I think maybe Opera. Because we have a captive audience, our particular product, we tell them we support Chrome, period. We still have people that use IE, and we kind of spank them. Anyway, you can use any of those with the web driver. I did run into, just I thought I'd mention this. Forever ago, I've always been a Mac guy at heart, even though I have to live in a Windows world. And I tried some of my stuff here that you saw today on my Mac at home this last weekend, and found out that the Chrome driver on the Mac does not bring the browser to the foreground. And I've read all kinds of crazy hacks that people have, like invoke a Apple script, and it sees it pop open, and it goes, oh, I should bring that to the front. So there's always going to be some quirks involved. But I have used it a little bit with Firefox, but not extensively. But it is supposed to support at least all of those browsers that I mentioned. And like I say, I'm not sure about Opera, but I think Opera. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
So is that a command line switch when you run the tests, or do you specify that in the test suite itself? For the browser selection?
Oh, you could do it either way. The way that I do it is actually in the resource file for all the test suites, but we could overwrite it. I mean, I know that you and I have talked about, we have a situation where we have two different types of users that need to attach to the same instance, and we want to keep them separate as far as their login identity goes. And so we're going to have to use a cross-browser approach. And so I'm going to have to rethink some of my logic with that. So, yeah. All right, any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. Thanks for tolerating my voice. And see me afterwards if you want a copy of the slide deck.
Thanks very much, Greg. Hey, if you guys have any lightning talks or anything that you want to do after Pratik's presentation, maybe put it on the whiteboard. And if you don't, that's okay too.
I thought mine was the lightning talk. Okay.
This could be a lightning talk. This could be a long lightning talk.
Can you guys hear me without the mic? Or, okay. Guess I'm not loud enough.
Hello? Okay.
Not sure how to get it to come on the screen. Yeah, it should. While we are waiting, I'm Pratik Malia. I'm a developer in Rackspace. I work with the cloud orchestration team, and we're actually hiring 2 Python developers. So if you are interested, just come and talk to me. I can't guarantee you that you'll get the job, but I can definitely put in a good word. And if you do get the job, then I get a referral. Yay! Thank you. All right. Oh, okay. Okay, so full disclosure, this is my first PowerPoint presentation to a public audience. And yeah, so if I goof up. Hello? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's start. I'll just start with an overview of, all right, so the title of the talk is Application Caches in Python. And so the, should I start? Okay, so yeah, okay, I'll just start with the first slide. Okay, so the overview. Yeah, I'm going to talk about what our application cache is, how does our application cache work, what was the problem with it, and how is it solved. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Shouldn't take long. Okay, what are application caches? So there's caching in a lot of places in the whole computer system, but for our purpose, as people who are writing servers or applications, web applications, application caches are just, you decide that, hey, this function is taking too long, so I better cache the results, and just like give it to the like pass it on to the user quicker than what it would usually take. And you can do that using a key value store. Memcached is something that a lot of people use, but you can also use Redis. Yeah, this is basically what I said. It stores data that requires a long time to compute, but does not change often. Yeah, since it does not change often, you can actually store it in the Redis you'll have to compute it. So probably this is all really basic stuff, which every one of you knows. But anyways, and full disclosure, there. Okay, this is not visible. Can you read that? Okay, I'll just read it out. There are existing packages for Python, obviously. But writing your own isn't hard either, because it's basically just a thin wrapper to talk to an actual key value store like Memcached or Redis. Okay. So what is our application? And and if you have any questions, just feel free to ask them at any time. I want this to be more interactive, but I guess there's some limitations to that. Okay, so our application, it's called Fusion, it's just a name. The orchestration, the service is called Heat, so we decided to call it Fusion. So it's a proxy server in front of Heat, and since Heat is an open stack, it's an open source project, we have limited control over what the functionality we can actually include there. So we have some of our own, like a proxy service in front of it. Okay. Yeah, so this is basically what I said before. So ability to reference heat templates. So cloud heat, there's a lot of stuff there. I'm not going to talk about, I can talk about this later, but I want to keep this talk really short. So let's just say that heat is a service, orchestration is a service which uses files called heat templates. And for some reason, the community won't allow that to be stored by within the heat service itself, which is reasonable, but anyways. So we decide to store it instead. Yeah, and so these are currently stored in GitHub. Yeah, without caching, it takes a long time to fetch these files, and that's why we're actually using that cache. And if you're wondering about the cat pictures, like I told you, I don't know much PowerPoint, so I just gave this to my roommate who really likes cats, and she just yeah. She asked me, "Do you have any pictures? People will get bored," and I was like, "I don't have any pictures." So she put in cat pictures. Okay. Okay. So yeah, what does our application cache actually look like? Yeah, so I apologize, there's not much of code in here because, again, I didn't know how to include code inside PowerPoint presentations. But I'll try to give an overview of this stuff, and I can show you the real code later because I don't think anyone from Rackspace is here, so yeah, I can show you whatever. So. Yeah, application functions are cached by using the cache object as a decorator. So the cache object is just like a Python class, and you define a call method for it, which actually does the caching. So if the cache is called like template cache, you'll just call the function with the you'll just call that with the function and the arguments to that function that you're trying to cache. So instead of doing that, you can use a decorator, and I realize there's a lot of concepts there, but yeah, like I can talk about that later. It's actually pretty cool. Yeah, like I said, the cache keys are generated using the function name and arguments. So basically, you can just go crazy and just cache all the functions which are fetching anything from elsewhere. So on the first call might take a lot of time, but the other calls will be super fast. But it works great only when the values returned by the function don't change very much, because if they do, then you have a stale value in your cache, and well, it's not the value that you want to return to your client. Yeah, basically. Basically that's the problem which I'm going to talk about. If data is stored in the backend store, it does change. Yeah, so if it does change often, how do you handle that situation? And this is if you guys know about, if you have faced similar situations, I would love to talk about this, because I'm not really memory or memcache or Redis kind of guy, so I didn't really know how to use it super efficiently or whatever. Oops, I'm back. All right. Yeah. So yeah, the problem. So before, the service allowed only using existing templates, which Rackspace authored. But now you're trying to allow users to specify their own templates. Templates are just files. So we're allowing them to store these files instead of just using what we have. So since they're storing actual files, now we have a problem that you can't just cache the function which retrieves that, because that file might have actually changed. Yeah, there's another cat picture here. Okay. So yeah, one way to resolve this problem is you just delete all the keys that change value. So you have some keys which did not change value, and you can continue to use the cache, but others are, you change them. the user, the client, he stored a template, so it's changed value, and you need to update that, or just like remove it from the cache. So the problem with just like deleting all the keys that are changed is that you don't really know which keys have changed, because like remember, the way the cache keys are being generated is from the function and the arguments. And if you're not careful, I mean, you might have a lot of functions which get the same data. And if you're like overriding that one data, then you have to know all these keys which need to be invalidated. So yeah, here's an example. You might have a function to retrieve data for a Siamese cat. Oh, okay, so that cat makes sense. Okay, so, but there might be a function which retrieves data for all the cats. So, so they're actually, instead of just for the function to retrieve the Siamese cat, you have two functions and two keys, which need to be deleted. Yeah, and how does the application know of these keys? It doesn't. So that's the problem. We don't know the keys which need to be deleted from the cache, so that the user does not get stale values. Okay, so here's the solution which I came up with. Yeah, the problem is to find all those keys which need to be deleted. The easiest one is just like flush the cache. But yeah, but all the keys are gone, you know, and you might have a lot of people like just fetching like files from there, and suddenly they're like going really fast, and suddenly it all slows down for a little while because it'll cache it again. But yeah, if keys are updated frequently, it defeats the purpose of caching altogether. The second solution is maybe you can, you can query memcache to Redis, and you'll be like, hey, can you give me all the keys that that are changed, so that I can delete that or update that? But memcache doesn't actually let you do that, so that's like out of the question. I think I don't know about Redis. Probably does, but I don't know. We're using memcache, so yeah. Another way is like you store the generated keys. So every time you cache some value, you just like store the keys. But the problem with that is that your server is probably, if it's in production, it's going to be multi-threaded. There'll be a lot of threads which have different keys. Sorry. And so each of these threads might have different values for the keys, and you have to coordinate them. It becomes a problem of distributed systems, and I really don't want to go there. Okay, so the final solution, which we're using now, is okay, this is like really small. And not updated. Okay, so there's a typo there. Okay, so the solution we came up with is just to be careful with the kind of functions that you're caching, and especially make sure that you generate the keys carefully, so that you generate so that like when you need to update or delete the keys, you know exactly which keys to actually remove them. And yeah, I think this is probably saying the same thing. And this is probably not the best way to do it. I mean, personally, I'm not comfortable with doing things this way, because it's like, I don't know, it smells bad, I don't know. But that's the only thing I could think of for the time being. Yeah, the drawbacks are, yeah, you can't just blindly cache all functions. So before, like when the data didn't change, we could just like use the cache decorator on all the functions which were slow, and it just worked. And nobody had to like really worry about the cache. But now it's like you have to be really careful because you want to know which keys you're actually storing and which need to be updated. Yeah, so now there is only like one functionality which needs to use caching, that is fetching these template files. So it's easy enough to be careful, but I don't know like as we add more stuff how it's gonna behave, or it might just get too complex to manage. And also you can't use the decorator anymore because you're generating the keys yourself, so you need to specify that. And that's it. I don't know if it was a lightning talk. It was longer than a lightning talk, right, Kevin?
It was longer than a lightning talk.
Okay, yeah, it was longer than a lightning talk. So yeah. Any questions? Sure.
I guess, so if you're storing all these, it sounded like you were grabbing stuff from GitHub and deploying them.
Yeah.
Does that mean that all of it is stored in memory? And do you have memory issues, blocking up your virtual machine or whatever when you go through these kinds of things? Or would that be another drawback, or are there issues to get around it?
You're saying that would it be a problem to fetch everything from GitHub and store it in memory?
Yeah. So
oh, okay. No, I think right now it's not been a problem because the number of files are not that large. So, and they're like text files. They're not like, like very big binary blobs or something. So they're just like text files. So they will not run into that problem yet, but that's a good point. Yeah, we might have to take care of that too. I think caches have some kind of least recently used policy, so maybe they'll just like cycle over. But I'm not a cache guy, so I don't really know. But yeah.
There were two things you mentioned as far as iterating through the Siamese cat and trying to find the Siamese cat in the list of cats. Redis has the ability to do like storing a hash, and you can iterate through parts of the hash and retrieve sections.
Okay.
Which could be really beneficial there. Memcache really doesn't have that same functionality.
Oh, okay.
That I'm aware of at least. And there's some API calls that we make with somewhat regular frequency that are very slow. And instead of waiting for that cache to expire and then allow those jumps to become slow again, what we've done is actually a background process that runs with somewhat of a regular frequency to just update Memcache in the background for us, so that way the front-end user experience is always quick.
Oh, okay. So you're just like checking for all the keys that are cached and just like updating them at a regular frequency. Is that? Oh, that's actually a really good idea. Yeah. So you don't have to wait for the user to request that, but you just like keep updating it. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. Thanks.
The downside is that owner of the API might not like you very much.
More questions?
So you mentioned that you didn't want to store your own mapping of the keys.
Yeah.
For some reason, I didn't quite understand the reasoning for that. You said something about distributed.
Yeah, so it's like, so the solution that was suggested there was that if you are not like generating the keys yourself, you just store whatever keys are being generated, like using the function name and the arguments. You just like store it somewhere, and that somewhere was the problem. You can store it within like the process, like have a local like dictionary or just store it there, but then there are like many threads, local thread. There are many threads or processes, so they don't have access to the same keys. Or you can store it somewhere in Memcache, but then it sounded like I'm running into the same problem again. So I can talk about that later. Yeah. I know this wasn't like the most clearest presentation, but yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Who were your users for updating the file?
Sorry?
Who were your users
users who are updating the files in GitHub?
They were like currently or like for.
Yeah, are they like Rackspace customers or they?
Yeah, they're Rackspace customers, and actually they're so the backend right now is GitHub, but we're storing it in our own key value store, like for the customers. For our own, like the templates which Rackspace officially publishes, that's on GitHub. But if you are a customer and you want to store your own templates, then we store it in our like key value store, like the cloud key value store. It's called Cloud Files, so you can store it there. Yeah.
So maybe there's some sort of GitHub solution. Like first of all, if you cache the data sources right instead of caching the result of a function that goes to some you
That's
say, hey, this repo URL,
yeah.
update that. And when a GitHub happens, you could say, hey, invalidate that key.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I like the asynchronous like cron job idea basically, but
Right.
obviously as the keys grow, it's going to take longer usually.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that GitHub itself should like send a webhook, trigger a webhook to
Locally, if you're using something like a tool belt or something like that, when they push, we could talk about this.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? All right. That's it.
All right, thank you, Pratik. So we have room for like another 15 minutes. It looks like there's still a bunch of beer back there, and I'm not sure if there's pizza. Is there pizza left? There's one slice of pizza left, you guys. So it's going to be a cage match for that last slice. But yeah, just hang out and mingle if you want for like 15 minutes. A lot of us will go over to the Chicago house after and sort of continue the conversation if you're interested. Other than that, thanks very much for coming out. I'd like one more hand for WP Engine for sponsoring tonight. Thank you very much. And we will see you in May. Thank you.